I've had some heart-wrenching conversations with parents over the years who have been faced with the reality of this in their relationship with their child. Here are some things you ought to consider as you're making this decision in your home. Build in time to process. Before you can make a sound decision on how to refer to your transgender child, you might need to work through some of the grief and fear that you may be feeling. If this is a new request from your child and you're still reeling from the shock of them coming out, build in some temporal margins to give yourself time to move through the grief, fear, and shame that you may be experiencing. Invite advice. The answer to this question, like so many within this overall discussion, boils down to our personal conscience before God. This means that what one Christian family decides on this will not necessarily be what another Christian family decides on this. It'll be important to get advice on this from trusted spiritual counsel. However, remember that advice is just that, advice, not infallible truth. You'll want to consider the advice you get with any promptings from the Spirit in order to pledge a clear conscience before God. Christian or not? Another thing to consider as you're making this decision is whether your child is a Christian or not. The Bible is clear that we as God's people are meant to remain in our God-given gender, but the Bible is not clear on how we are supposed to address non-Christians that don't uphold that statute. If your child is a professing Christian, then I believe you have a duty, both as their parent and their sibling in the faith, to exhort them toward obedience. In this case, obedience regarding the gender binary that God created them in. This, of course, ought to be done lovingly and respectfully as you direct them to the core tenets of their true identity that exists completely within Christ, weighing their autonomy. If your child is not a Christian, your decision may also be influenced by whether or not you still hold executive control over them. If they're an adult and live outside of your home, or you no longer hold executive control, you may be more inclined to call them by their preferred gender pronoun or name in order to show respect for the free will that they've been given by God to live however they'd like to. Of course, after having consulted your conscience first. If they're still living in your home, you may want to consider their age, maturity level, and degree of personal autonomy as you go about making this decision. I've heard great arguments on both sides of this question. Parents have justified their decision to not call their child by their preferred gender pronoun or name by stating something like, just because my son feels like a girl does not mean that he is a girl. He's biologically a male, and no amount of surgery, hormones, or cultural identification can change that. Therefore, I will continue to refer to him as a male because I refuse to feed his delusion that he is a girl. There's certainly great merit in that justification. I've had other parents say something to the effect of, though I don't believe my daughter is a male, I respect her God-given autonomy to choose how to live and how to identify, and therefore I will call her by her preferred gender pronoun or name. There's great merit in this justification as well. Seek a clear conscience. Remember, the most important thing parents can do as they wrestle through this question is to maintain a clear conscience before God. So this may be a case where the how is more important than the what. What you decide may not be as important as how you go about implementing that decision. You'll want to consider not only what your personal conscience will allow, but how you communicate it to your child. No matter what you decide, you want to communicate it in a way that honors both your child and your own faith. So for example, I have thought, prayed, and gotten advice on this. And though I do not believe that you are a biological female, because God created you as a male and so you are, I have decided that I will refer to you by your chosen pronoun and name because I respect your God-given autonomy to choose to live and identify however you'd like to. Please be patient with me as I adjust to this. I've referred to you as a male your whole life. If I slip up moving forward, it's not because I'm intentionally disrespecting you. It's because I'm imperfect. Or I have thought, prayed, and gotten advice on this, and I've decided that I will not be able to call you by your preferred gender pronoun or name. Not only does it go against my conscience, but I also believe that you're not old enough to make this decision on your own. I know this will be a tough answer for you to contend with. We can revisit this topic in 6 months. Until then, I'd love to better understand your experience with your gender. Or, I have thought, prayed, and gotten advice on this, and though I wholeheartedly respect the free will that God has given you to live and identify however you'd like to, it violates my conscience to call you by a pronoun or name that represents a gender that God did not create you as. I hope you know that it is never my intention to bring harm or disrespect to you in any way. I'm certainly willing to discuss ways in which I can help you feel more comfortable with your gender while not violating my own faith. And finally, as you're considering whether to call your child by their preferred pronoun or name, keep in mind that this is not necessarily a both-and situation. Yes and no are not your only options here. For example, I've had parents tell their children, I can't in good conscience call you by your preferred gender pronoun, but I can call you by your preferred name, or vice versa. So it's always important to consider each individually before God as you wrestle through this request from your child.